Alright, welcome to the video lecture for Crimes Against Property. This is Chapter 11. So this has a lot of different crimes in it. It's a little bit of a unique chapter because a lot of these crimes in modern times have been consolidated into one statute, usually called a theft statute, but that includes all these different types of crimes. Because the theft statutes are so broad in general, though, we're going to cover some of these ideas of these different crimes so we understand what it really means. Now, there are three types of property crime. There are those that involve taking somebody else's property, those that involve damaging or destroying someone's property, and those that involve invading somebody's property. We're going to start off with talking about robbery, because this is probably the most serious crime here. Robbery is taking a property by force or threat of force. So this is a violent crime against persons and their property. Now, so robbery requires force or threat of force when you take the property. This is different from larceny, which just involves taking and carrying away somebody else's property without their consent, with the intent to keep it permanently. So if you were to take your neighbor's bike and you just want to take it around the block, that's not a larceny because you intend to return it after you take it around the block. So larceny does require this intent to keep it, so that is something important to think about. Embezzlement is the first abuse of trust crime. Embezzlement means that you are legally entitled to use the property in a certain way. Maybe you're an accountant, but that you take and convert that property to your own personal use. You use your employer's trust and use the money your own way. There is also fraud, which deals with getting property by deception. And underneath this, you can obtain property through false pretenses. This is where you make a false representation to gain the property. So you say, if you transfer this car to me, I can sell it for you and I'll return the cash. I have this special in. Meanwhile, you really intend to just keep the car yourself and flee with it. So that would be a theft by a false pretense or a deceit. This intends to kind of fill the gap between an embezzlement crime and a larceny crime, because it doesn't quite fit with either one. So most states have consolidated larceny, embezzlement, and false pretenses into a theft crime. Robbery is still a distinct crime, just with that force or threat of force requirement. It's different from these other types of thefts. And the elements of a theft statute in the modern era are taking property and carrying away the property with a purposeful or knowing mens rea, a circumstance element of attaining permanent possession of someone else's property to equal the crime of theft. Now, other types of property crime are white-collar crimes. A lot of this goes back to Edwin Sutherland's research, and this includes mail fraud, Ponzi schemes, kind of civil liability. So all of these crimes are property crimes, but they're also considered white-collar crimes. Now, focusing in on robbery again. So robbery is theft accomplished by force, violence, or intimidation. So it is the combination of a theft and an assault. And so the actus reus is taking property by force or taking it by threat of force with the intent to permanently keep it and the intent to threaten or to use immediate force. Circumstance elements are that it's someone else's property and you take it from a person. So if it's your own property, you can't rob it. If it is if it if you don't take it from a person, then it might be a larceny or something else, but it's not a robbery. There are degrees of robbery, and those often look at the amount of force that you used and whether or not you had a weapon, how fearful you made your victim. There's an example of kind of some of these distinctions in State v. Roland on page 447, where the question is, did he rob or steal from his victim? We have a dissenting opinion because it's kind of an unusual case. So, but robbery, remember, is both a crime against the person and a crime against property. Force or threat of force. If you're armed, it's more serious. If you actually commit an injury, it's going to be more serious. Now, other crimes here that are other property crimes that we haven't talked about yet are receiving stolen property. This is the idea that you have benefited from somebody else's property without participating in the wrongful acquisition of it. So sometimes it is difficult to find the person who actually committed the theft, but you can track it to a certain spot because fences maybe are often known to police. They know these people are maybe certain places or people frequently receive this. The actus reus of receiving stolen property is receiving control of the property. The mens rea is that you intend to permanently keep it, and you receive property you knew to be stolen, you honestly believe to be stolen, or you recklessly believe to be stolen, and then it needs to be somebody else's property. Your book has an example about speakers. Somebody bought them at a pawn shop, and that question was, should they have known that they were for a low price? Should they have known that they were stolen? The court finds that she did not know that the speakers were stolen and actually orders an acquittal, which is pretty rare. Now, next crime against property is arson. Arson is damaging or destroying buildings by burning. So the actus reus is burning by fire or explosion. Mens rea is that you intend to start the fire and that you cause the fire, and the fire actually damages or destroys the property. There are generally 2 degrees of arson. First degree arson is burning a home or another occupied structure. Second degree usually includes unoccupied structures like boats or a vehicle. So you do have to have this kind of malicious intent to start the fire or have the destruction. States vary about the amount of damage that's required for it to be an arson. In some states, smoke damage alone would be sufficient. Other states would require some scorching or other things for it. So that is a little bit of the difference between the amount of damage. So our next crime here is criminal mischief. Criminal mischief used to be called malicious mischief, and it's related to arson. It involves destruction, tampering, or deception or threat to tangible property. Tangible property are physical items that you can hold or touch, like a car, or as well as like your backpack or your tablet, which is compared to intangible property, which is like a stock or a bond, things that you cannot see. Now, the actus reus of criminal mischief, again, destroying, tampering, or just threatening and deception. The mens rea varies. It can be anything from purposeful to negligent. We do have a circumstance. You do have to have some damage to property, and your action needs to cause the damage to the property. Your book has an example of malicious. It's a case from 1993. It was called malicious mischief back then. The defendant was convicted of criminal mischief for painting the N-word and KKK and racial slurs on the victim's home and I believe the sidewalk, the front walk, and they painted also on the steps leading into the house and the front screen door, and they were convicted, and the court denies all of their post-trial motions for relief, finding that the judges specifically say it's abundantly clear the defendant spray painted these phrases and words on their home, and they did so without permission. So they find that there was plenty of evidence to convict beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal mischief here. So this criminal mischief is a nice crime that captures just all their damage to property. And just your book note, criminal mischief can be anything from there's an example in your book from the Model Penal Code, I think, that says, like, as far as the level of seriousness, criminal mischief can be anything from a minor misdemeanor, which generally means that you can only be fined up to so much, like $150 or $200 for the action, all the way up to a third-degree felony, depending on how much damage you caused. So for criminal mischief, it could be a felony if you cause, according to the Model Penal Code, more than $5,000 of damage, a long-term interruption of the ability to use the property. Those things make it a felony. If it's something minor, then it might just be like almost a ticketed fine. So this is in some ways a catch-all crime for damage to property. Now, we're going to shift to our last group of property crime. And these crimes deal with kind of invasion of other people's property. The most serious of which is burglary. Burglary is the breaking and entering a building or structure with the intent to commit a crime inside. The actus reus is the breaking and entering, also the surreptitious remaining, which means you kind of like hide inside of, maybe if you hid inside a store until they close so you can spend the night, like that one Natalie Portman movie, that would be breaking and entering because you surreptitiously remained. And your mens rea is that you intend to commit the breaking and entering, and then you intend to commit a crime once inside the structure. Burglary is usually reserved for occupied structures, places where people can live. In some states, burglaries can only happen at night. That's not the case in all states. Some states, burglaries can happen any time of the day. Modern burglary protects a lot of structures. It can include almost anything in some states. Other states do have more restrictive definitions. Your book has an example on page 463, State versus Jewell, where the question was, could he burglarize his own home? This is an older Indiana case from 1996. His wife and he were separated. He moved out of the house. She changed the locks on the home. She asked, I think, maybe asked him for a key. She had a relationship with somebody else. One night at 4 in the morning, he broke in using a kitchen window after he removed the screen. So that's the breaking and entering, as well as at nighttime, and it's an occupied structure. He hit the boyfriend over the head with a 2x4 until he was unconscious, and then amputated his penis and fed it to a dog. The book notes that the victim underwent unsatisfactory reconstructive surgery, but the legal issue here is, can you burglarize your own home? And the court finds that here, yes. He broke and entered with the intent to commit a felony inside. Assault, that's the felony. He was assault with a deadly weapon. here. The home was in the wife's name. He had moved out. She had changed the locks to prevent him from entering the house. He did so in the middle of the night. And so they find that the evidence here supports the conviction of burglary. So we'll go ahead and note too, for the mens rea, burglary is a specific intent crime. So you have to intend to break and enter or remain, and you have to intend to commit crime once you're inside. You don't actually have to commit the crime. The burglary is complete once you break and enter with the intent to commit a crime. But there are two mens rea elements here. As far as the degrees of burglary, it can be anything from first degree to third degree burglary usually. First degree can have 10 years to life sentence. Second degree can have 2 to 20 years, and third degree can have 1 to 10. First degrees we look at, are you armed? Did you cause a physical injury to someone who didn't participate in the crime? And did you threaten somebody? Second degree is less serious, while third degree is just the entering without maybe committing the additional crime or causing any physical harm to somebody else. So because it can run the spectrum from like what Jewel did, where he assaulted somebody to the point where they were rendered unconscious and caused lasting physical harm, all the way to just like Natalie Portman in that one movie where she like stays the night in a Walmart and is like living there and hiding herself there, where she's not causing lasting long-term harm to a person. So there's a huge spectrum here, which is why the degrees are useful. Our next crime, criminal trespass. One thing to note about criminal trespass is that this can be an adequate provocation for voluntary manslaughter. If you think back a couple weeks, I said that criminal trespass was one of the provocations. We would talk about it more in Chapter 11. So criminal trespass is the unwanted, unauthorized invasion of another person's property. The actus reus is the unauthorized entering or the unauthorized remaining. Most states require knowing here, so you are aware that you are unauthorized and unwanted on the property, but you stay. Some states have a specific intent. In Missouri, criminal trespass is a strict liability offense. Circumstance element, it's somebody else's property, and that satisfies it. Under the model penal code, we have 3 degrees of criminal trespass. Third degree is, first degree is entering or remaining at night, so it's a lesser form of burglary in that context. Second degree is a petty misdemeanor in entering or remaining. And third degree is a violation of remaining in a place where no trespass notice is given. So, and this can be adequate provocation for a voluntary manslaughter as well. So if you hear something outside your window, you go outside and you see somebody who's trespassing, that can be it, and you don't have a cooling off period and you kill them, that could be considered an adequate provocation. Now, identity theft is our next crime. This is a crime that is growing in scope and spectrum. There's double the amount of victims as for ordinary theft. Consequences can be involuntary. Some people can have their entire life savings taken away. And this is very hard to catch and very hard to convict. This is an area where the criminal law and the conduct is rapidly changing so much, it's hard for the criminal law to keep up with it. There are also intellectual property crimes. This is where somebody takes technology and ideas that have been copyrighted for their own use. So again, something else. There's an example of this in a cyber thief for computer fraud on page 473 in your books, the United States versus China. This again is challenging. All right, so there was a lot of content in this chapter. We started all the way back with larceny, the taking and carrying away the property of another with the intent to permanently deprive them of the property. all the way to some cyber crimes. So there's a huge scope here. Property crimes are very broad and very diverse. If you have questions about any of it, please feel free to reach out. I would recommend categorizing these crimes into those 3 categories: taking the property of another, damaging or destroying it, and invasion, and then maybe having that 4th category of cybercrime to kind of categorize and keep these concepts organized as you move forward with studying this chapter. All right, reach out with any questions. I look forward to seeing you next